Check. Good. So I'm Max Ceron. Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association Podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, I'm out there scouring this globe of ours for the most fantastic stories I can find. Today, we have a wonderful guest coming to us from sunny Arizona, and this is Bill Myers, who is the National Program Director of the Skilled Trades. How's it going today, Bill?
Oh, it's going great. Max, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm sitting in my steel mill here, my AI-generated steel mill. But outside, I got 2 feet of snow, and it's coming down right now. Not like that in Arizona, I assume.
No, it's a little sunny here. I won't tell you the temperature since you're looking at snow, but I think we're going to be in the 70s.
So, Bill, let's talk a little bit about, who you are and where you come from. I read on your bio here that, you're based out of the greater Phoenix area right now. Is that where you're from? Is that your roots? Where did young Bill come from?
Young Bill came from Toledo, Ohio, the glass capital of the world. When I was there, I don't know what they are now. I haven't been back in quite some time, because of the 2 feet of snow on the ground thing. But I started out going to a vocational high school. They didn't really do that anymore. I don't know why they got away from it. I guess there's some here and there. But I went to a vocational high school, took welding. They had a great program there that if you finished, because you took high school there for 3 years for welding.
Okay.
So you started out your sophomore or your freshman year, you went through welding, machine shop, and drafting.
Okay.
Back when they still drafted.
That sounds like
that
sounds like a great program, though.
It was, yeah, it was. You went to welding after your freshman year. You picked one of those 3 to, go into. Went into welding. You go welding shop once a week for that whole week. The other week, you went to the regular high school classes that you had to take. Science, English, math, algebra, all that stuff. By the time you were a senior, if you finished everything with a high enough grade in welding, they put you on what they called co-oping. So you went to work for somebody for that week you were supposed to go to welding, and then came back to school and finished high school the other week. So it was a great way to get your foot in the door of a company when you were still going to high school. And then once high school was over, that company could, keep you on as a full-time employee or cut you loose. So they ended up keeping me as a full-time employee, and I worked there for 20 years before I relocated down here to Arizona.
So 20 years with basically the first company that sniped you out of high school.
Yep.
That is something that in itself is unheard of.
I know. It's, people don't do that anymore. They'll leave a company for a quarter raise every now and then. You hear about that, and it's like, no, you didn't build up anything. You gotta stay there. And I was always wanting to move to Arizona, and I actually waited 2 years because I actually resigned on the exact same day that I started 20 years before. So I wanted to get that 20 years in at that company, but I started out as a welder. We welded everything. It's not like today where a lot of people get into, okay, you're only a MIG welder, or you're only a stick welder, or you're only a TIG welder. We built things that encompassed all the welding processes, including spot welding, so we did everything. And you were handed a set of prints and said, here, go make this.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, this guy's going to give you this part, that guy's going to cut that part. You did everything from start to finish.
So
and you learned a lot doing that.
Yeah, those types of shops exist, but they're generally in that custom, cost plus type of world of manufacturing. Generally, I've worked in shops like that where it's, just plates of steel rolling and you got to build, form, cut, and do everything yourself. But I don't know if the world really builds like that anymore. It's not efficient.
Well,
First of all, it's not efficient, and we all know
not
that.
at all.
Right? But there is something about custom. As soon as you say custom or a one-off, it's going to cost you 3 times the money. but there's a reason for it to be custom, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, for yourself, what kind of stuff were you doing? What was getting built in that plant?
Well, that plant was basically building stuff for automation.
Okay.
So it was, that was in the 70s. I don't want to date myself too bad, but that was in the 70s and the 80s when people were ramping up to do exactly what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
make everything automated to where you didn't have one person doing all of that job. You had, a whole bunch of people that were involved in building something, whether it was one thing or whether it was 100 things.
Mm-hmm.
You had a whole bunch of people, but we did all kind of automation for Anheuser-Busch, for Libby Owens Ford, for all the glass makers, for anybody that was getting into automation. Goodyear Tire and Rubber. There were so many companies back then that we were just so busy. One year we worked 360 days.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
wanted to work, the work was there, and it's still going. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not as big as it was,
Yeah.
so it was like, hey, you got to get here, you got to do this, you got to do that. We did a lot of stuff for the nuclear industry back then was starting to take off,
Mm-hmm.
so we did a lot of work for Babcock and Wilcox, which was in Cleveland, a big
Yeah.
supplier of, nuclear control panels and automation and stuff like that. So it was a good lesson in a lot of different areas.
Well, Ohio's a really neat state in terms of its capacity for manufacturing. The space it has, a fairly low cost of doing business in the state, and it's not not overly populated like lots of the other states are. So people can find jobs, and I've interviewed a lot of people from Ohio. Actually, I'm going to be in Columbus tomorrow, but it's
Oh, nice.
it's one of those states where there's a lot of work, not a lot of people. So I always hear people finding jobs and kind of sticking around. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, they do. There's quite a few people that, I've run into in Ohio that have stayed at the same job for a long period of time. Now, it's usually the older generation, but even some of the younger generation, when they get into a good place to work in Ohio, they stay there, because the companies treat them well, they pay them good. It's a unionized,
Mm-hmm.
state.
Yeah.
So that kind of helps with that. And then on the other side, you come to Arizona and people don't stay at a job. I
Yeah.
was so surprised at the difference between the mentality of how it was in Arizona versus what I came from in Ohio.
Well, and you see that all around the world based on the population, the industry, right? Like in Canada where I live, we're in the prairies. I'm north of North Dakota, so we have agricultural, mining. We have a little bit of oil and gas. All those jobs kind of are lifer jobs. You get into
Oh yeah.
mining. Mining's kind of a forever job. You get into ag, that's kind of a forever job. You get out to the coasts, and the work seems a lot more transient, right?
Yep. And there are some of those, mining jobs here in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of copper and, they still pump that stuff out.
Yeah,
And a lot of people like to, especially in the welding world, like to run the shutdowns. When
absolutely.
a lot of those power companies shut down and stuff, they go in there, do the repairs, move on to the next one because they can get paid really well, work
Mm-hmm.
6 months out of the year, and then go, you know what? I'm going to wait for the next run of shutdowns, and they follow the shutdown. And they
Yeah,
make a good living at it and, work 6 months out of the year.
absolutely. I remember picking up shutdowns, and you'd make enough money in 1 month, take a couple months off, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
now, now for yourself, coming up in Ohio, before you got into this kind of vocational program with your high school, did you know, or did you already have access to what the trades were? Was it in your family? Was it something you had seen, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Well, here's how it was. I was in a one working parent household. My dad was a tool and die maker. So, of course, you learn about trades. You learn about holding the light out at night while your dad's under the car trying to fix it. I'm sure you've heard that story
Mm-hmm.
from a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot of people before where, you fixed your own car, you changed your own oil, you did all those things on your own, and he worked at night. And I seen him and I seen what he did at work, and I wasn't really wanting to go into tool and die making. But when I was there, I seen a guy heating up one of those dies for
Mm-hmm.
one of those big presses to get ready to weld it,
Yeah.
because it had broken. And that just really kind of caught my fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got a chance to go to that school, because it was one of those schools where you had to take an aptitude test to get in, make
Yeah.
sure you were, handy with tools and knew about safety and stuff like that. I really wanted to go into drafting. But
Okay.
then when
Yeah.
because like I said, you go into drafting, machine shop, and welding your freshman year. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I got to welding, this is where I tell people the person teaching you is the most important person. That person can sway you one way or another. And while I loved drafting and I went back to it when it, became CAD and Pro E and SolidWorks and stuff like that, that guy was dry. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if you ever talked to a draftsman that used to draft on paper, but those guys are dry. But that welding instructor was so energetic and so captivating that it was
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? I'm going to stick with welding
That's
just
amazing.
because of
Yeah.
that person.
And then, you had that, a solid 20-year run. And this is something as a Canadian that sometimes I get a little bit confused of in terms of terminology in the US. But, you say that you're a certified welder and fabricator, right? Now, for myself in Canada, for me to become a certified welder and fabricator, it was 3 years of school for welding and 4 years of school for fabrication to get my red seals. In the US, they don't really have those programs set up like that. So how does one become a certified welder and fabricator in the US?
So there's really no certified fabricator thing. There's no,
Okay.
there's schools that you could go to learn fabrication, and people will hand you some little certificate that says you took a fabricating class
But
at
it's
so and
not like
so.
diploma that you can use around the world.
Yeah, it's not like that.
Okay.
So, but certified welder in the United States means that you went and took a test at a third party place. That person then tested that weld under whatever those guidelines were,
Mm-hmm.
and you passed that test. So that's
Okay,
how you
I see.
become a certified welder. Now there's, the AWS, API, there's,
As
all those
me, all
different
of them. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of those certifications. That's the only way you can become a certified welder in the US is by passing one of those tests.
Okay, cool, cool. And then the shop you worked for, I assume, was probably under the guise of one of those companies. So it would have been like, ASME or AWS D11 or something like that.
And well, what we did was we had a certification company actually come to the shop.
I see.
So
Okay.
whenever one of our guys would need certified for something, they would come into the shop, watch you do the weld, and take those pieces with
Okay, cool. So
and then they would go test them and then give you the results and give you your paperwork when you were done.
now, in the 20 years you were there, I doubt you did the same job for 20 years. You by the time you left there, it sounds like you were ready to move on to the other side of the desk. So, what was the progression like within that company?
So it was you start out after they, hire you full time. Of course, you're still going to get stuck with that same grunt work that you were doing as a
Yeah.
high school student. And it, a lot of it has to do with luck. It's you have the skill, but how does that person that hired you at 17, mind you, know that you have the skill to do that job? Well, somebody kept calling out sick. And then finally they
Mm,
came over to me and said, "Look, this guy keeps calling out sick. We know you went to welding school. Let's see if you can weld this." And then when you do that and you do that again and you do that again, the next thing you know, the guy that keeps calling out gets canned and you take his place. I mean,
that
that's
does
just
happen. It
that's
happens.
exactly what happened. It
Yeah.
was no, there was no like, oh, hey, right out of high school, you're gonna go start to weld on these things. It was just my chance came a little earlier because that guy didn't show up to work.
Yeah. Right
That
place,
was
right
the only
time.
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what I did, what most people need to understand is pay attention to what everyone else there is doing
Hmm.
because you're going to learn so much from watching everyone else and what their job is. Do I now know how to do his job? Do I now know how to do his job? And pretty soon they're going, hey, you're ready to start fabricating something because you sat there and spent the time to learn what all these other pieces were to take. Now, yes, welding school gave me the skills to oxy-fuel cut. Back then, we still oxy-fuel welded. We did wire welding, stick welding, TIG welding, the three major ones that are in school. And you made some little things here or there, but you didn't really learn fabrication as a whole.
Yeah. And
So
you're not really
once you
ready to
pay
hone
attention,
your craft. That comes with time,
yep,
right?
exactly. So then it was, okay, you've done really well at this. And I think I was only 26 or 27. And they said, hey, we want you to be the night shift foreman.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. That pays more money. I take it. Yeah. It pays
Yeah.
a lot more money. Okay. I'll do that. And then, you steadily get better and they go, you know what? We want you to be on the day shift now. And we're going to put another guy on the night shift. Then the next thing people start moving and leaving and the plant manager left. And then they came to me and said, how would you like to be the plant manager? And I was like, well, my plan was to leave here in about 6 years, but for 6 years, I'll be the plant manager. So that's what happened.
It's interesting you bring up that whole aspect of, biding your time. And then you brought up night shift. That's actually come up on this program a few times. One of the things I hear from employers often is how this incoming generation is less inclined to want to work shift work or weekends or evenings and stuff like that. And it's something that I have to always reiterate to the youth. I did 8 years of night shift in order to break that ceiling and to get into management. Same thing.
Yep.
You want to try management? Try it on nights. You're going to be the night shift foreman until you're ready. Then you move to days because that's when all the headaches are, right?
There you go. Exactly.
And so I did my time at nights, and I had 2 young kids, and I did the whole thing. I even went through a divorce during this time. Like, it was not a great time, but
you're telling my story.
Yeah.
Do all welders have the same story?
so then I ended up having to, and then I worked my way through it, right? I worked my way through it and got to where I needed to be. And I always find it so important to iterate to the young people that are coming in that you have to be willing to work the shifts. You have to be willing to do either the switch shifts or the night shifts or the weekends. Basically, whatever you get offered, you take it and you do the best you can at it. That's the only way to get ahead,
Yeah. You're absolutely right. If you don't, and we'll get into it in the next half, but if you don't put in, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Right.
You have to, what you're going to get out of something is what you put into it. So if you don't want to move up, if you don't want to be a manager, then stay a welder. Let them know you just want to be a welder and, you don't want to move up. But, the people that that you're talking about, they always want that instant gratification.
Right.
Where, you know what, I'm good at this. I'm smart. Why am I not a manager? Well, when we ask you to work overtime, you don't work overtime. Managers sometimes work overtime because,
they have
that's
to.
what the job entails.
Yeah.
Because we have to get the product out the door. So, if you're not willing to do any of that, there's nothing wrong with staying, a welder your whole life if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But if you want to move up, you're going to have to make sacrifices.
That's right.
Because I made them. I had the same 2 little kids. I went through the divorce. I did the whole, but it's what you have to do if you want to move ahead in that field.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way for them to gauge you other than they're looking at you as a welder. You've got to prove yourself as a leader of these people. And we're going to start at night because during the day, everybody gets everything ready for the people that come in at night and just do some welding here, some this there. There's no real, heavy management task being laid out.
Yeah, there's no phone calls ripping all the time.
Yeah.
All the forklifts are free, all the cranes are free, right?
Yep. Nobody's asking you for delivery dates or anything like that, because the phone's not ringing. You just have to manage the people that are there.
That's right. And now for yourself, you get offered that plant manager job. That I find that step from supervisor to manager is a tough one because that's the first time you actually have to start looking in terms of financial responsibility, right?
Yep.
Because up until you get to that manager position or plant manager position, you're just worried about man hours and product, like how many people are on, how fast will it take to get made, what are the problems, rework, blah, blah, blah. Once you get to plant manager, it's now wages and deadlines and profits and losses and
wages, deadlines, ordering to make
yeah.
sure it's there when you need it there. Then, we were a union shop. So every 3 years, you're now meeting with the bargaining unit to go,
Mm-hmm.
hey, what are the raises? What are the benefits? What are this? And it's like a whole different thing. But the thing that I did when I got put onto days was I started watching what the plant manager was doing. What are
Mm-hmm.
his duties? What all does he have to worry about? So that kind of helped in a way that, a lot of people get thrust into that position and are not sure what to do. Where I was kind of watching what he was doing to make sure that, hey, if something happens, I can fill in his shoes if he gets sick, if he goes on vacation. I wasn't thinking he was leaving. So it wasn't about that, but it was about, hey, what if this guy's off for a couple weeks because he gets hurt or he gets sick or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
And
yeah, you got to
and,
pay attention.
and you want to be ready, right? Like there's
Yep.
someone like I just was talking to a group out in Toronto last month, and one of the questions from the audience was, how do you get yourself ready for those improvements in your life or to move up to the next step? It's like find someone who already has that job and watch what they do, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
if
it.
you like they're already doing the job you want, so pay attention and then see if you can do it better, right? Like that's kind of all you can do. So
Yeah, I wanted to learn how to run a press brake.
yeah.
So after work, as a welder, I stayed and watched the guy on second shift set up a press brake, figure out how it ran, figure how, everything worked. And then,
Mm-hmm.
that was one way of getting more information and more ways of learning how to do something without actually going to school. I could get my schooling on the job.
Mm-hmm. And then with this plant, you're at your 20-year mark now. Like this is a serious investment in your life, right?
Yep.
Did you have it in the cards to leave, or what was it that came up within this time that put the bug in your ear that it was time to go on to something else?
The auto industry in Detroit
Collapsed.
was starting to tank.
Yeah,
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 you've seen it. Everybody's seen it.
yeah.
Well, I seen it too. And I was like, this was in 95 when I started looking. And I was like, okay, so this is going down. There's, people starting to get laid off here and there. Now, the 20 years that I worked, I was never laid off one time.
Mm-hmm.
We never had it closed. We never did anything. If you were good, now we were like anyone else. We had our slow times. But if you were good at your job, they'd have you paint the walls and sweep the floor before they'd let you go because they knew you could find another job somewhere.
Right.
So they didn't want you to go anywhere. So they kept you on. But then in, 94, 95, it was like, okay, well, the auto industry starting to move on from Detroit. Things are starting to go, another direction. I think it's about time I looked for something else.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it in a climate that I like. Because I had visited Arizona on vacation a few times and went,
Yeah,
man, this is great. It's booming. There's, nobody was out here in 96.
yeah,
Now
yeah.
you can't, you can't believe how much I've seen grown here in the last 26 years.
Wow.
It's just
Yeah.
unbelievable. But yeah, that was what it was just looking at everything that was going around in that area and going, you know what? I think it's time for a change.
All right.
But I
And then
wanted to make sure I hit that 20-year mark.
yeah, and did you know what you wanted to do? Like it's
None.
one thing to say I want to change, but are you looking for the same type of job? Are you looking to change types of career completely? What were you like? What were you thinking?
No, I knew I was going to stay in the manufacturing field.
Mm-hmm.
There was no doubt that I was going to do something in the manufacturing field that involved welding because it had consumed 20 years of my life.
Mm-hmm. That's what you
I
knew.
wasn't,
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't going to go back to school and learn something. I was in the trade for good, so I had no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do. All I knew is I was moving to Arizona and then I'll figure out what the job is when I get there. That
Mm-hmm.
was it. And a
And
lot of people wouldn't do that, but I was like, you know what? Grow a pair. I'm a
yeah.
welder.
So what was that first job that you got when you got to Arizona?
All right. So the first job, I started with a company that was an upstart. they were looking for a welding foreman. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I took a hit on pay, but again, it wasn't about the pay at that time. It was about where do I put my footprint in?
Yeah.
What field am I going to get into? So it was a startup for building enclosures, again, welding and metal for the dot-com craze.
Okay. Okay.
So we were building data centers
Okay. So
at an
custom data centers.
alarming
Yeah.
rate. From 96 to about 2005 when the dot-com crashed, we were
Yeah.
busier than all get out.
And those are like those modular data centers that
Yep,
stack
modular
together
data
with the
centers,
air
but
conditioning in them.
more even down from that is there's an enclosure that houses all of those
Servers. Yeah.
all of the servers and everything else. We
Mm-hmm.
were building those for inside great big data centers. I mean, these
Okay.
rooms were the size of that background of yours, and they were literally empty. And we built these cabinets that people would come in and rent from whoever that internet service provider was,
Mm-hmm.
and put all of their servers in there to run their web services or whatever it was that they were running. And then we did some for individual companies like Sprint, um, just
Like telecom or whoever. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Apple was a big company that we worked for. All of those crazy people that were starting to get on the internet for everything and anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I stayed, I think the foreman of the weld shop for about 3 months until somebody figured out that, hey, this guy's a lot smarter than he's leading on. And then the next thing you know, I was the plant manager. Then I moved up to the VP of manufacturing within a couple years.
Okay.
And then I stayed
yeah.
at that company for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So the first one was 20, the second one was 15. And, I would have stayed there, but the company just went out of business
Mhm.
because the dot-com went out of business.
Right. Right.
We tried to do some other things and diversified, but it wasn't enough to keep that machine rolling. We
Yeah.
had a lot of equipment and a lot of stuff. We, matter of fact, moved some of our manufacturing to Mexico.
Mhm.
So I was traveling from Arizona to Mexico 3 times a week. 'Cause
Wow.
from here, it's only a 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
The only thing I can tell you about that is cross the border back into the U.S. before 2:00, because after that, everybody and their brother's trying to cross the border.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets pretty backed up.
But yeah, Chamberlain, the garage door people, they do a
Mhm.
lot more than garage door openers. They do the entry gates for going into all those parking spots, like at airports and
Oh, yeah.
wherever you
Okay.
pay to
Yeah.
park.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do that. We did a lot for Otis Elevator. They do elevators and escalators and stuff like that. Their plant is down there in Mexico. So there's a lot of airplane seat made in Mexico.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. I mean, it didn't last, but there it was. That was the end of that 15 years.
So then what happens?
So then,
Because at some point you start getting into education, and you're getting
Well-
pretty long in the teeth here already.
I know, right? So what happened was the guy that was the owner of the company, the actual owner, not the guy that, comes in and says he's the president, but really doesn't own the stock of the
Mhm,
company. But the owner, he goes, for the last 15 years, I've watched you, and I don't know how you're so patient, especially when you were teaching people in Mexico how to do all these different jobs without knowing Spanish. I go, well, it was a lot of picture taking, a lot of pointing, and a lot of showing. And he goes, you got to think about getting into education. And I took his advice and I
Mhm.
went into education.
Now, did that sort of signal the end of your time on the manufacturing floor?
Well, that was 35 years on the manufacturing floor.
Mhm.
You do get burnout at a certain point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So that was kind of like my cue to go, you know what? Let me look into that. And then when I seen some of the places that, were starting to
Look for
bring
instructors.
trades
Yeah.
back into
Mhm.
education, I was like, you know what? This might be okay. Let me try it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're right at the half hour mark. This is fantastic. What we'll do is we'll take our break right now. And when we get back, we'll start down the path of education and all the
All
roads
right.
that have led you down. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
All right. So don't go anywhere. Anyone that's listening, follow along here. We're just going to take a quick break for our advertisers and our supporters here on the CWB Association podcast. We'll be back right after these messages.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and I'm here with Bill Myers, coming to us from sunny Arizona. Right before the break, we were talking about your extensive, career working in manufacturing, right? From welding up to plant manager and all things in between. Now, you got the bug in your ear for education, and as many of us who ended up in education, someone told us to get into it. Same with me before I became an instructor. Someone said, hey, have you ever thought about teaching? And I was like, no, I haven't, but I am now, right? So for yourself, how did you, once someone put that bug in your ear, how did you start pursuing that? How did you become or get into educating from like the private sector of welding?
So, it was kind of the same thing. The guy said, hey, you might be good in education. I think you really would do well as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought, well, I don't want to teach some subject that, math or science or something like that. And then I started looking and I go, hey, wait a minute and I didn't know this. I lived in Arizona for, 15 years and had no idea that there were schools here that, taught welding. So I just started looking at the, Indeed and all those other ads and said, hey, wait a minute, this school is teaching welding. It's, not that far away. Let me go see what it's all about. So, I filled out their application. They called me up and said, hey, you filled out an application for a welding instructor? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, what can you meet tomorrow? And I'm like, sure, I can meet tomorrow. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth because I don't I don't and if anybody at Ancora is listening, it was before you guys bought Ancora, so I'm gonna leave it with that disclaimer. But when I drove up to the school, now I had lived in Queen Creek, Arizona my whole life. I traveled to Chandler and to Mexico, but I didn't know a lot about Arizona. The place that I was driving to was 70 miles in one direction away from me. Now, if you've ever driven in Arizona, driving 70 miles usually takes a good couple hours
Okay.
because of traffic. Yeah. So I was like, okay, let me go see what they got. I drove up there. It wasn't in the nicest part of town. I drove around the block and came home.
Oh, really? It was pretty rough? Yeah, pretty rough.
Yeah, because again, it wasn't because I didn't want to do it. It was because I was kind of like, no, I don't know. That looks kind of weird. That's the guy called me up and he goes, were we supposed to meet sometime this week? And I go, I don't know. Were we? Did you make an appointment? I just played it off. And he goes, oh, no, come back in tomorrow. And I was like, I sat down and thought about it again. I go, you know what? That's not fair. I need to give him a chance. I said I would be there. I'm going to be there. So I went there, took a tour of the facility and seen the welding shop and what they were going to do there. Now, it hadn't been, I think it'd only been open for about a year for welding. And it's a well-established school in Arizona as far as automotive goes, Arizona Automotive Institute. And it's been there since 64, I believe. And they were always into automotive. They had a diesel program and an HVAC program, but they were just adding welding. And I was like, okay, I see some potential here.
Yeah.
They had some nice equipment. They had a good welding booth. And I go, okay, I'll come interview with them. And, I took the tour, talked to him. He said, "Hey, what kind of welding do you do?" And I go, "What kind of welding is there?" He goes, "Well, can you stick weld, wire weld, and TIG weld?" I was like, "Yeah, we've done all that." I go, "I can weld on aluminum, stainless." So he gave me this little welding test, and I was like, "Okay, this is it, huh?" I mean, I've taken harder tests in high school, but all right. And then, 2 weeks later, I started working for him as a welding instructor.
Now, you talked about taking a pay cut moving from Ohio to Arizona when you first made that transition.
Yep.
And I don't know if you want to talk about the pay cut you take going from being a welder to an instructor, because I don't know anybody in the world, myself included, that went from being a full-time welder to teaching without taking a pay cut, because teaching don't quite start at the same. Was it like
Well,
that for you, or were you
now
okay?
okay, yeah, but remember, when I was working at the last job that I had in Arizona, I was the vice president of manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Mm-hmm.
going to take a pay cut. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to go from 6 figures to mid,
Mid
5.
five, yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't, and I've never made pay my main focus of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to tell that to the students. And I go, "Look, if you don't like doing this, switch. Go do something else. Go do automotive. Go do diesel. Go do HVAC. If you like doing this, be aware that there are going to be times you might have to sacrifice a little pay for the love of your job." So
Mm-hmm.
think about that. Yes, everybody has kids, everybody has a family to feed, but if you can feed your family and live comfortably with that job, stick with that job. The longer you stay at a company, the better that looks when you go to the next company. Because what somebody doesn't want to hire, and if I've read hundreds of resumes, if I seen on there that that person worked at a place 1 year, then 6 months, then 1 year, then 6 months, and he wasn't a traveling welder, I that went right in the trash can.
Yeah.
I'm not hiring somebody that's not going to stay. So if I take a job, I'm going to stay there.
Yeah. Now,
But yeah, you take a good pay cut.
well, and I talk to educational, vocational trade schools across North America weekly, and they're all hiring. Like, I mean, right now, people are dying for instructors, good welding instructors,
Oh yeah.
fabrication instructors. We talked about fabrication not being offered in the U.S. It's still offered in Canada as a diploma vocation, metal fabricator. But there's so few people with that ticket that it's almost impossible to find instructors to teach that trade, and I hear it all the time. Like, how do we get people to leave welding and join and become a teacher? And the first thing that comes up is wage,
Yep.
and that's always one of the very first things that comes up. And when I became a teacher, they sold it to me on, I guess it's the way of life, the summers off, the shorter days, all the holidays included. And I had summers to go work shutdowns to make up the money to get back into 6 figures. So that's what I would do, is I'd teach throughout the year, and then I'd go do a couple shutdowns at the mine
Right.
in the summer when I'm off for my 8 weeks, and I'd go make enough money to bring home what I considered was the wage that I needed for my family, right? But it is a tricky thing, because you do fall in love with teaching quite quickly. It's not something that, it's either you like it or you don't, and if you like it, you kind of like it forever.
Yes. And
Yeah.
and you only like it, and I found anyways that the
Mhm.
people that like it are good at it.
That's
The
right.
people that don't like it are not any good at it.
That's right. And not
And
everyone can
and
teach.
yeah, not everyone can pass the information on. The biggest hang up that I see in some people is they want to talk to that student like they're talking to an employee, and you
Mm,
can't do that.
no.
They are there to learn, not to, be
Produce.
belittled
Yeah.
or, browbeaten or anything that you did to those people that were working for you. This is a different animal altogether.
Mhm.
They learn through positive reinforcement, not, some of the stuff you used to yell at your crew.
What are y'all, a bunch of dummies over here? No,
But yeah, it is very rewarding, but I think it's rewarding for the right person.
yeah.
Not
Now,
everyone is cut out to do that.
now, how did your path go? Was there any training that you had to take in order to become a teacher?
Yeah, and the training that I took to become a teacher, I now give to the people that are going to be teachers.
Hmm.
So we're accredited, through all the different accrediting bodies, but we're also accredited through the NCCER.
Okay.
It's the National Center of Construction Education and Research. It's big down here. I don't know if it's big in Canada or not. I know they're in a lot of other countries, but they have a specific thing that they want to pass on to people that are going to be craft instructors
Hmm.
about, hey, here's how you need to talk to people. Here's how you need to do this. Here's the teaching strategies that you can use. So it's, a little bit of a coursework. Most people get it real quick.
Yeah.
And those are the people that you can tell are going to be good at it. Um, Everybody has to have a minimum of journey or technician level knowledge and skill to be a craft instructor for them. But
Okay.
it then gives the students credentials that they can take with them. So back when we went to school, you got a piece of paper that says you graduated, from this high school. And then I had a little card there that says you also graduated from the welding program at this high school. This gives the student more than that. It gives them credentials that say, hey, you passed oxy-fuel cutting, both the knowledge-based test and the hands-on test. You passed,
Mm-hmm.
1G or 2G or 3G or 4G in, 7018 or in flux core wire. So it gives them a little more than just that diploma. So that's why
Right.
we use them. And they're an accredited apprenticeship program too. So if you were running an apprenticeship program,
You could log your
you would
hours.
use
Yeah. Yeah.
the same curriculum
Yeah.
just as an apprenticeship program. So it gives the students a well-balanced education.
And do you try, as an educational center, to produce students that are going to succeed in your local area? Because every part of the world around a school has their own industry. And generally, you try to kind of prepare them for the work that's going to be within an hour or two from there, right?
Absolutely. So we don't do a lot of scratch, start, TIG. It's not used in Arizona.
Right.
There's no pipelines running through here. There's no, oil fields in Arizona. There's dirt and sand. There's, a lot of MIG and stick jobs,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the TIG jobs are going to be shop jobs where you've got a foot pedal and you're just sitting there TIG welding. So
Mhm.
yes, in Texas though, yeah, they have lift arc, for TIG
That's right.
because that's big in Texas, but not in Arizona. Same thing with, all of our other programs like air conditioning. We have an HVAC refrigeration program. We use swamp coolers here in Arizona
Mhm.
sometimes in the summer because the humidity is really low. You won't
Right.
find that in Florida or some of the other states, so we don't even bother teaching it.
Right.
It's all about what's going on in that area. Now, it's not to say those people will travel, but they usually won't travel for a while.
Yeah. Until they establish their
Yeah,
trade
I
and
mean,
get better. Yeah.
I was there at 35. I didn't travel till I was 36 years old,
Yeah.
So, but I did it because of what I seen was going on in the area. Some
Yeah.
people do it because, they have family somewhere else, or they have this going on or whatever, but they don't seem to move as much as, tradespeople move for the job.
Yeah. They follow the money. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, in terms of the other accreditations that someone would come out of the college with, would they come out with like a few AWS certs, maybe an ASME cert, or nothing like that?
No, just one AWS. So once they're within 3 weeks from graduation, they have a form they can take to an instructor. It says, hey, I want to go take this test. The instructor says, okay, show me. You got to do it in front of me first. He does it. He
Mhm.
passes. The instructor signs off, and we send him to a third party to get that certification.
Okay, cool. They wouldn't come in house and do it at the
No,
at the
they don't
school.
do it in-house.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, after your time with this college, are you still there, or
I'm
because
still there.
because it sounds like you don't
kicking
like to move around? So
Well, it's been 13 years, so I don't know. I'm going to try to beat the 15. I don't know if I'll beat the 20. You never know how your health's going to turn, but it would be nice to beat the 20 too.
Oh, I mean, I'm adding this up: a 20, and a 15. I mean, aren't you retired at some point in there?
Nope, not yet. I people always ask that. They say, "Oh, what about retirement?" I go, "Then what do you do? What do you do after retirement?"
I got a long list. I got no issues. I got so
Everybody
much.
has that long list, but then I see them and they never do the list. They have the list, but they don't do the list. So I'm like, you know what? I'm having fun. I enjoy what I do.
absolutely.
I enjoy who I work with. Why would you leave that?
That's right. That's right.
When it becomes a burden, when it becomes you don't want to work with people, when you don't want to do that job anymore, that's usually when somebody leaves.
Yeah.
If you're having fun, if you enjoy what you're doing, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Makes you live longer.
So what are some of the changes you've seen since you started teaching to now, in the 13 years?
Not really a lot of changes in the industry. Welding's welding. They make better welding machines than they ever did now. They make, the rods, the wire, the gases, they all get better. The process doesn't really change a lot. I think the equipment is the biggest change. And then the next biggest change is the people going into the field.
Right.
It's like, how do you get across to them that, yes, you're going to leave here and you're going to know how to weld. But that doesn't mean the person that you're going to work for knows you know how to weld. They're going to see all that, but you're going to have to go in there and maybe
Prove
make
it, yeah.
$15 an hour to start. And then, work your way up from there when they see what you can do. But you're not going to go out there and go, well, I want to make $40 an hour. It's not going to happen right out the gate.
No.
And some of that is, hey, we still have some of the older people with the older mindset that are now, running and heading those companies, and they're not going to want to hear about, well, my kid has to go to the doctor and this has to, they didn't do that. And it's not any fault of theirs. It's that their wife was at home. Their wife took care of all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to take a day off to do this and
it's a different world now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see why students want to do that. They want to be more active in their kids' lives. And that's great. But at the same time, that employer wants you to be active in their business. So that's a fine line that I think a lot of students are missing out on.
Yeah. And I think that students, or just people that are new to the trades, they get told a lot of BS too coming into it. There's a lot of, and I've seen this firsthand, a lot of instructors being like, yeah, you're going to get into welding. You're going to make $100,000 next year. And it's like, whoa. Like, yeah, okay. We all get to the 6 figures, but it ain't that first year, man. I'll tell you that.
It's not.
Like, you got to take some time. You got to establish your reputation as a welder. How well do you work? How many days do you miss a year? All these things matter in your dollar value. So if you want to be, and you alluded to this in the first half of the show, you want to be more involved with your family, if you want to be home for the baseball games and for the suppers and the birthday game and the birthdays, all those things, then you're probably not going to make as much money as someone who sacrifices those things. And I'm not saying that either way is wrong or right. You choose where you want to be, but don't be jelly of someone who's making more money because you don't know what they gave up to do that. Right.
Right. That's the key is, if you want to do that, great. You should stay home with your family. I missed a lot of stuff. My 27-year-old son, I couldn't tell you what he did from the time he was born to the time he was 10. But that was my choice to make that sacrifice. If you don't want to make that choice, that's fine, but don't expect to make the kind of money I was making either.
Right.
Because that's not going to happen. You have to be willing to make the sacrifice. And if you don't want to, that's great. I believe in both sides of it. But then go home, go to the baseball game, and don't complain that you're not making as much as the guy that decided to drive to work today.
Yeah. Or time and place. That's what I try to tell a lot of people.
Yeah.
time and place. Like I had kids really, really young. So I was, my ex-wife was a teenager. She was 18 when she got pregnant. And for us, those really, really formidable years when you got to work hard, your 20s and your 30s, where you're really establishing yourself, was the hardest time for me. But by the time I hit my 30s, my kids were already grown and I could devote all the time in the world to work. And I could work, 60, 80 hours a week in my 30s and not miss anything because my kids are already teenagers, right?
Yep.
So so I had a very slow progressing career for 20 some years where I was welding and just making my paychecks and trying to do good. And then I hit that mark where I was like, I got the time now. Now I'm going to push into the management. Now I'm going to go back to school and take some courses at night. And I got this time to work on myself. So it's not such a rush, is what I try to tell young people. Don't be in such a hurry to get nowhere. You don't even know where you're going yet. Let's get out there, see what the skills are, see what you like. Because welding in school is very limited. You just see a piece of it. Once you get out into the field, you realize that there's a bazillion paths you could pick from.
Oh, yeah. Not only that, but I go, you're welding on 10 inches at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot different. When you say, oh, I need another rod, no, what you need to do is burn the rest of that rod down to the stub
till the numbers
are, and then restart the next rod and go from there. If you don't learn how to restart, you will never learn how to weld.
Yeah.
It's not just about running one bead with one rod. So we used to take them and get them, bigger size pipe so that they would have to keep doing those restarts over and over and over again. And they were like, yeah, this is a little harder than I thought. Yeah, because you're not just welding on 6 inches of metal with one rod anymore. This is the real life right here.
Yeah, I remember having foreman get mad at us for lifting our welding hood to get the next rod going. He said you should be able to get a rod in your stinger and onto that puddle before it stops being red.
Yeah.
I
never pushed anybody
right.
That
imagine,
bad,
nobody, he wasn't a great. I won't say he was a great boss, but you know what? It was something to be said about his way of looking at speed and efficiency in terms of what are you doing in between? Between that little blue light burning away, that's when you're getting paid. That's what your boss is paying you for, is that light, that rod burning. That's what you're getting charged with by the hour, is for that light burning. Whatever you do in between that light being on and off is money being lost. And I remember thinking, this guy's such a hard but I got pretty good at organizing myself so I had the minimum amount of downtime at any given time in the day, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's one of the first things you do in manufacturing, too, is you're going, okay, where can I put this so that it's closest to the next job that, is going to be done to it, so I don't have all this time wasted just moving it from place to place to place.
That's lean. That's fundamentals of lean, right?
Exactly.
The value stream, right? Yeah.
And people don't realize it, and they go, why? I go, because the quicker you can get that to the next place, the quicker I can get that done.
Yeah.
That means the quicker I can get that done, the more money the company makes. That will hopefully trickle down to everybody else.
That's right.
Or we don't know that for sure, but hey, that's how it works.
Or someone could just pick it up with the forklift and move it. Yeah, but what if someone else is waiting for that forklift? Now you're affecting 2 jobs. Maybe you're affecting 3 jobs. Your simple decision might affect dozens of people down the chain without you even thinking about it, as simple as where you're putting that part, right?
Well, that's like I was telling, all the employees, at the last place that I worked, I was like, do you know how long it takes to get something done? Well, I don't know. That guy gets that done in 30 seconds. No, it takes as long as the slowest person.
Right.
So whoever the slowest person is in this process, whether it's moving the material or that guy doing that particular task, that's how long it takes to get something done once you start this whole assembly line.
Mm-hmm.
So once this gets going, how does Ford crank out a car every minute?
Yeah.
Because that's the slowest job.
Right.
1 minute. So they've got it down to somebody having to do something that takes 1 minute.
Yeah. First in, first out. wild. Yeah. So what do you in terms of your teaching, you say you teach a few things now, like you started off kind of as a welding instructor, fab instructor, but now you also instruct instructors. So, what is it that occupies most of your time in your daily work life?
Probably sitting here trying to figure out what the next trade course is that we're going to offer somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
or visiting the campuses that, have already launched a new trade program. We've come out with a couple this year. We started with plumbing. We're doing electrical now. Welding and HVAC were our oldest. And
Mm-hmm.
then we started with electrical. Then we moved into plumbing. So I don't know what we're going to do next. It could be solar. It could be, something that
Is on the
everybody needs.
horizon. Yeah, yeah.
But not, not that everybody needs so much as when we graduate those students, they can get a good job.
It'll be needed then. Yeah.
Because there's no sense in having any kind of education that, hey, I got this bachelor degree in basket weaving. Well, great. There's no need for basket weavers anymore. They have looms and stuff that make that stuff
Yeah.
for pennies on the dollar. So it's about making trade courses that people can take, but they also can get a rewarding career out of it.
Well, I think we kind of forgot to just go there. So where is it that you work and teach? And like, what do they do? We kind of been talking about it, but we haven't actually gone over it.
Well, when I taught at the Arizona Automotive Institute up in Glendale, Arizona. Like I said, been there a long time. Now I do it from the comfort of my desk in my room. So everything is virtual now.
Yeah,
COVID changed that landmark.
Yeah, absolutely. I switched from teaching. I left teaching during COVID because I was going crazy sitting at home waiting to figure out if I had a job or not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people did. Once they released a lot of stuff, we would bring students in groups to do the hands-on portion so that there weren't too many people in the school at the same time.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff was virtual. We did a lot of virtual teaching. They took knowledge-based tests virtually. And it kind of changed that landmark for pretty much the whole company.
Yeah.
Now the teachers and everybody are back to all of the schools, but a lot of the management people are now back to virtually work.
Yeah, or a mix of something,
Yeah. So I don't actually teach students anymore. I just teach instructors that are going to teach our students. And it's more about, hey, how to navigate the Canvas course, how to navigate the NCCER site and testing system and stuff like that. But I would say that takes up some of that's not the majority though. I do order all the product for all of the schools that are going to start a new trade program.
How many schools is there in total?
Startup. 22.
Wow. And they're all in Arizona?
No. We have schools we have one in Arizona, 4 in Texas, 2 in Pennsylvania, and 4 in North Carolina. We're getting ready to do one in Georgia. That's the next. These schools don't all have trade programs. We're converting some of the programs that
existed.
People take, but just don't. There's no good jobs for them anymore, and they're hard to hire. So with our accreditation, you have to remember that we have to place these students in a job that they took for while they were
studied.
In school.
Yeah.
So if I take welding in school, that school has to place me in a job, and if we fall below the benchmark, they don't get to teach that course anymore.
That's right.
So yeah, sometimes we get rid of a course just because we can't place people anymore.
That makes sense. What's
the market gets saturated?
Well, what is the market like in Arizona? For the people that are listening to this across the U.S. and Canada, if they said, you know what, he sure made Arizona sound nice with the hot weather and the sand and dirt. I want to come down there. Is there work? Is it looking good?
If you want to come down to Arizona, I will tell you that there is tons of work. in the electrical and HVAC field,
Okay.
obviously, because HVAC is in every house here, or you're going to cook to death.
Mm-hmm.
But welding is shop welding. So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean is, you know what I mean. You're welding in a
Manufacturing.
shop. You're
Yeah.
not welding out in the field a lot. There is some for building the shaded parking structures and stuff like that. There is some structural welding, still being done down here because, they still build
Construction. Yeah.
buildings out of metal and
Yeah.
beams. But Texas is, booming.
Yeah.
If you want to weld, Texas is the place to go.
Well, I know like our company, CWB, we have quite a bit of investment in Texas. We got lots going on around there. But I do come across a lot of welders from Arizona and people that, kind of have come through there. And I always wondered like how much welding work or what kind of would be the bigger, types of work that you'd see there.
The most is structural. Then you have the shutdowns like
Mhm.
anywhere else. We
Mhm.
have a lot of mining going on here. But of course, those mines are in areas that are not
They're remote.
heavily populated. Yeah. So you're going to either travel or you're going to live, in your little camper for 6 months and then, take off to the next place or go home and, wait for 3 months before you feel like working again.
Mhm.
But those jobs are here too. It's just the bulk of them are shop, in manufacturing, semiconductor, stuff like that, or, out in the build trades.
In the construction trades, yeah.
Yeah.
And your school programs there, are they growing? Are they like specifically the welding ones? Are they
Welding
expanding?
never has a problem with getting students.
Yeah.
HVAC never has a problem with getting students. Diesel and automotive, they don't have problems getting students, but less students want to take those kind of programs,
Yeah, I've thought about going back to teaching kind of towards the twilight parts of my career, getting back in front of a classroom, I mean, I worked with a few gentlemen that did that when I was teaching. They had kind of like retirement age substitute teacher. If you need me, call me. I'll come fill in for a class. And they were great, older guys who had welded their entire careers. And I thought, that's a nice gig. That's a nice gig.
right?
Like,
Yeah.
Someone wants to go to Mexico for 2 weeks. You come and teach their class for a couple of weeks. Perfect. That sounds awesome.
Well, we did that for a lot of, people that even if they're still working full time, we have classes at night and sometimes people go, well, I don't want to, teach full time, but I'll do a class. If you have a class at night, and our classes are 5 weeks long, so they'll get a paycheck for that 5 weeks of classes. And then sometimes they'll go, you know what, sign me up for another one, or they'll go, you know what, write me out of this one and I'll put up in 5 weeks. And, so either way, there's full-time and part-time work in the teaching,
There is.
especially in trade.
Yeah, you're right. There is. Now, in terms of, the growth of welding in general, I'm constantly seeing these numbers of we need 20,000 welders. We need 100,000 welders. The retirees are going out the door. What are we going to do? Do you feel like we're in as bad a shape as everyone's kind of making it out? Are you worried about the number of welders or tradespeople we have coming in?
Well, I'm not worried about the number of tradespeople coming in. I think, I do believe that we do need, more people into the trades, but I don't know that it's welding. Welding is kind of gotten glorified in the last 10 to 15 years. Everybody now wants to go out and be a welder, but there's not that much hype about, hey, I want to go out and be an electrician, or I want to go out and be a plumber. That new generation, you have those kids that grew up with those blue collar fathers that were welders and stuff like that are saying, yeah, I want to go out and be a welder. But then you have that same group of, young kids that seen their parent be a plumber and went, no way am I doing that.
Yeah.
So I think some of the trades are going to suffer here, but I don't believe it's going to be welding.
I hope you're right.
It's still a well-paying job if you want to make a career out of it and you pay attention and you do what you're supposed to do and you learn the trade the way you're supposed to learn the trade, you can make a darn good living as a welder.
Awesome.
And you can for the other ones too, but the work I don't think has gotten as glamorized as, being a welder.
Yeah. And it's a tough one. I remember in Canada, there was like way too many electricians for a time. And then it seemed like we had electricians standing around at every corner, looking for work. And now, and then it switches to another trade. Then some other trade, everyone kind of jumps into, and we have, then we have too much. But I don't know if I'll ever see that again in my lifetime where we have too much of a trade. I think that maybe in general, there's just not the amount of uptake as there was.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think we're ever going to see that whole, we have a whole bunch of electricians standing around, because, and I don't know about Canada, but I do know in the United States, the infrastructure is getting old. Bridges are getting old. The, piping and plumbing and everything's, aging out. And if nobody's there to replace it, then we're going to be in trouble.
That's right.
So I do see, some trouble for people looking to hire tradespeople in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the biggest things that I've always, because we have PAC meetings.
Yeah.
Where we get the people, from the community to come in, talk about our trades programs. And the one thing all those employers constantly say is, well, you need to train them to do this, and you need to train them to do that, and you need to train them to do this. And it's like, we're training them as welders, electricians, plumbers, and HVAC techs. We're not training them for your specific need.
Yeah, that's on
Your
you.
specific need needs to come from you.
Yeah.
And here's the problem with trades right now. You're not investing in your employees' future growth.
Mm-hmm.
You're not. You're taking the money and you're saying, okay, we're making record profits, but you're not putting anything back into training your employees or training the future employees for the next generation. You're not investing in your own workforce. You're expecting to come in and go, hey, this school does this. Hey, we need you to train them to also do this, this, and this. No, that's specific to your field. We don't trade specific to your field. We train specific to an industry. So, that's the biggest hurdle I see.
It is a big hurdle,
workforce going through. I don't know about Canada,
it's
but at
very
least
similar,
here in the United States, it's the employers not doing anything.
Well, and sometimes it's a disconnect. And I've had this meeting, and actually last year we held a forum about it at FabTech where we talked about, industry wants, but what does industry give? So let's say, for example, we have a large manufacturing plant, and let's pick a city, Ohio, somewhere in Columbus. I'm going to Columbus.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in Columbus. And down the street is a trade school from Columbus. And that facility is upset that the trade school is not teaching the kids on how to run CNC brakes because they want to hire these welders, but they also want them to know how to run CNC brakes and shears and stuff like that because this company has all this equipment. And so I posed the question to the company. It's like, well, you are aware that the funding is very low and limited for schools in North America. Oh, yeah, we hear about the funding issues all the time. All right, but you want them to teach their students on a $500,000 piece of equipment for you. Well, ideally,
Right.
We'd like that. Well, have you ever thought about you buying the equipment, donating it to the school, getting your name put in front of the lab and saying, this is the Columbus, Ohio X company's, CNC lab. And then, you know what? I bet that school would be more than happy to teach kids how to run that brake press if it was donated from industry. At what point do you start actually getting involved with your educational outlets instead of just complaining about them, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's the problem. They just complain about it, but they have no solution other than to say, well, why don't you teach this? Well, why don't you hand me that piece of equipment? Because I've had that same conversation. There was a guy here in Phoenix that does stairs, metal stairs for apartment complexes and buildings and stuff like that. And it was a specific round tube that a smaller round tube went in, and he had a specific socket weld that he wanted made on that tube. And I go, well, yeah, that we can teach that, but we don't buy that material. That's not material that you get that material. I would hire 3 people. I go, I'll tell you what, if I find 3 people that want to go to work for you, I'll teach them how to do that.
You buy
send
the
me
material. That's right.
And he sent it. And
Yeah.
I showed those 3 people and they went to work for him.
Yeah.
So then at the next meeting, I go, see what happens when we work together.
Yeah, when you communicate,
I go, we can't just assume what you need. You have to tell us, and then you have to help us get it.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then we're a partner. If you just come in here with demands and say, well, I need your people to learn how to do this, that's not solving an issue.
Yeah.
Because I laid out the curriculum. They do fillet welds and they do plate and groove welds. That's it.
That's
if
the time.
you want something special,
Mhm.
then provide the material and let us do it. We'll do it.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that's a very important, I think, for industry to hear is, and I preach it all the time, but get involved. Don't just, if there's a college in your area and you somehow still can't find enough employees, that means that you're not communicating to the college in your area. Go talk to them.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Or
Go
you're not
get them.
willing to help.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Bill, we're coming on the end of the podcast here. It's been a wonderful conversation. I love this. We've hit off a number of great topics, from welding right to teaching and education. Now, what would be a piece of advice for someone that's looking to get into education as a welder? Like, you've been welding for a few years or maybe a couple decades, and you're thinking, you know what, maybe teaching sounds cool. For someone that made the transition like yourself, what would be some great advice you could give to someone that's thinking about getting into teaching?
So, couple things. First, if you're going to do it, don't do it for a school that is funded by a government entity. So I work for a for-profit post-secondary school. They pay better. They don't require a teaching certificate, which is hard for somebody in the trades to get. Because in the United States, if you're going, they call it CTE. If you're going to do that type of education at one of those type of schools, then you're going to need to get a teaching certificate. The only reason I was able to get one was because of my experience as a plant manager and vice president of engineering, and the amount of time I spent doing that. And that's you have to give them verifiable times. But if you go to one of these schools, they usually have their own training program. They usually were going to give you a test. Hey, if you're going to teach this, I need to see that you can do this.
Yeah.
And then start out slow. Take it easy. If you don't want to do it full time, they always have part-time classes.
Yeah.
And see if you like doing it. The biggest piece of advice I can give them is if you don't like doing it, don't do it. Because you're just going to goof up the next group of people that come through. Don't do that to the people trying to get an education. If you're not any good at it, recognize that and get the hell out of it and go find something else to do. Bag groceries, whatever it is. But, if you want to stick with education, make sure you love educating the younger generations that may not think the same way as you do.
Yeah, and you can't get frustrated. You can't get mad. Like, you got to just, well, honestly, I think the students keep you young because they teach you all the new lingo and stuff. But,
oh, absolutely. I didn't know how to text before I started teaching. Oh, no, let me show you. And that's not true because I worked in the, .com area for so long. But that's, if you're going to teach, get some computer skills too.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're at that retirement age where, the only thing you know how to do is turn on Facebook. A lot of education is done now through Canvas and Blackboard and stuff like that, and LMS system. So get some computer knowledge behind you, at least enough to navigate that.
That's great. That's great advice. And it's very true. I don't know a college anywhere in North America that doesn't use an LMS to do almost everything now, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Even, we don't even teach our trade courses. Some of them we do hybrid where they come into school for a couple days because they always got to do the hands-on at the campus. But a lot of ours are, 100% on ground, and they still use the LMS. Their textbooks are ebooks. There's no physical copy of a book anymore. So you have to have some computer skills to teach. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it needs to be more than, hey, I know how to turn on, Google. Well, that's a start.
Awesome. All right. And last question for the students out there. How do they sign up? If they're in the Arizona area, how do they find out about the welding programs offered by Ancora?
If they want to find out about any programs at Ancora, they can look online. We have an online presence. they can show up at the school and say, hey, you know what? I want to hear about your programs. There's admissions people there all day long. There's phone lines all day long. They can find Arizona Automotive Institute, on the website. They can find Ancora Education on a website. That'll take them to all the different schools if they're not in Arizona, if they're in Texas or Pennsylvania, and they can choose whatever program they want depending on where they want to go to school. It'll list all the programs at each one of those schools.
Awesome. That's been fantastic. And thank you so much, Bill. You taught me some stuff today, and that's I love to learn.
Cool, Mac. This was great. It was a good time.
Awesome. And for all
I wasn't sure at first what to expect, but well, you never know. And then it's like, all right, cool. This guy's a welder. Because there's people that say, yeah, I'm a welder, but they're not really welders.
I totally know what you mean. 2 or 3 years or something. Cool. Yeah. No, I did my time.
You did. Yep.
Awesome, Bill. Well, thank you so much, like I said, for coming on the show and for letting us know about your life and career path and also, your workplace, Ancora, and the college there.
Thank you for having me, buddy.
Awesome. And for all the people that have been following along at the podcast here, thanks so much. We had a wonderful episode today. Like you heard, if you're thinking about getting into learning to weld, now is the time, get out there. But also, and this is a theme that we've heard quite a bit, if you are an established welder and you've thought about it or maybe haven't thought about it, but we need teachers all across North America. I see postings all the time, even in my province here in Saskatchewan, where they're looking for a welding instructor right now. It's everywhere. So if you've thought about it, think about it, maybe go ask at your local college if they want some part-time help, because we need to get ready to empower this next whole generation and make sure to do that. We need good teachers. So, it's been wonderful. Keep downloading, sharing, and commenting on the podcast. And also we have the fan mail feature on Buzzsprout if you want to send us a direct message. And of course, you can always find us online on all our social medias. So until the next episode, take care.
We hope you enjoyed the show.